do all of this in person, but hopefully it isn't too far away from us all. Now, tonight I'm going to be talking about hybrid cloud management. But first of all, my name is Sarah Lee, and I'm a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft. I'm based in Scotland, as you might be able to tell from the accent. Please do reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. You can find some of my contact details on screen. I do love to meet new people and make new connections. Now, in terms of tonight's presentation, we're going to be talking about hybrid cloud management because IT environments are evolving. They're no longer that data center that sits in the basement of your office and is just a bunch of servers and some storage and a bit of networking. We're now looking at a diverse infrastructure that we're having to manage. We're looking at virtual machines, we're looking at serverless, we're looking at containers, hosted on like traditional servers, they're in branch offices, they're on the edge of the computing, and they potentially are in multi-cloud providers, so AWS, Azure, Google, and then your private hosting as well. So it can be a bit of a nightmare as someone who has to manage all of that. And this is what I want to talk to you tonight about, some of the tools and functionality that we have at Microsoft to help that make that all much easier for you. Now, Windows Admin Center is one of my favorite tools that we actually have. It helps with the remote management of your Windows servers, regardless of where they're running. So it could be a physical server, it could be a virtual server, it could be a server hosted on-prem, could be in Azure, or it could be in another cloud provider. Windows Admin Center is a free tool as long as you've paid for a Windows Server license. So if you're looking to manage your Windows servers, chances are you already have a Windows Server license. So it's definitely something that you can utilize out the box. You don't have to, try anything. You don't have to get budget approval. It's a great tool. And what it does is it helps you manage and make things a bit more streamlined. When I was managing servers, I used to have multiple console windows open, multiple RDP sessions open to manage the servers and carry out tasks. I'm sure we've all had those checks that we have to check every morning with event logs and check any errors, or maybe apply patches to it, or look at capacity issues. What Windows Admin Center does is allow you to do all of that management in one place. So you don't have to have all of those different consoles open. So it really is that one single pane of glass. And I know that's a horrible phrase and we've heard it tons of times, but that's really what this Windows Admin Center is. Now, it can help bridge that gap. If you are managing a hybrid environment that includes private cloud as well as public cloud in Azure, Windows Admin Center can help surface up some of the services that we have in Azure to your on-prem environment through Windows Admin Center. So you can interact with Azure through Windows Admin Center, and you can interact with your servers through Windows Admin Center. And you can see on the slide here, it surfaces up quite a few of the technologies that you probably want to think about when you're in a hybrid environment. So backup services, disaster recovery services. You can even create a virtual machine within Azure through the Windows Admin Center. So you don't really need to leave the Windows Admin Center console for a lot of your day-to-day tasks if you're looking to manage your servers. Now, Windows Admin Center isn't just about the Microsoft tools and the Windows servers tools. We have integration with our partners. So a lot of the hardware manufacturers that you're familiar with have extensions that plug into Windows Admin Center. So you can actually do some of the hardware maintenance that you need to do for some of your servers to manage them through the Windows Admin Center. Windows Admin Center also has the ability for you to develop your own extensions. There are SDKs available. So if there's something that you want to do, or if you maybe work for a hardware vendor and you want to start to integrate some of your functionality into Windows Admin Center, then it's there for you. There's lots of documentation about how you can create your own extensions. And I think this is key to where this tool can go. It's that one single pane of glass that makes everybody's job a lot easier. And that's why you see some of the big partners here on screen have actually integrated into it. So instead of only just having their own management tools, they're actually leveraging the Windows Admin Center to help surface up some of their own management tools as well. Now, in terms of hybrid, we are looking to simplify everything. There's a common theme really to my presentation, having that single control plane, that single pane of glass where you don't have to think about other things and you don't have to have multiple tools installed in your environment. And this is where we start to introduce the notion of Azure Arc. Now, Azure Arc is a small agent that you can install on your servers and some of your other infrastructure to, again, extend your on-prem environment to Azure and extend Azure to your on-prem environment. So Azure Arc is a new service. I think it's been out for just over a year now, and it can run on a variety of different infrastructure. So currently, at the moment, in general availability, you can start to manage some of your Windows and Linux servers. We announced this week at Ignite that Azure Arc for enabled Kubernetes is also available. And in preview, we have Azure Arc enabled SQL Server, and we also announced machine learning. And I haven't got a new slide in order to do that new announcement that we talked about. But what this allows you to do is actually start to leverage that Azure platform within your environment. So again, no one wants to go into excuse me, no one wants to go into multiple tools in order to look at their environment. That's the last thing anybody wants to do. So Azure Arc can help you manage everything from Azure as well. So you can use Windows Admin Center to start to look at the day-to-day tasks of some of your servers, but you can also use Azure Arc to help you do that from the Azure portal. Now, Azure Arc is something that is exciting a lot of customers, but one of the questions I often get asked is, how much is it actually going to cost? If you're to implementing Azure Arc, there is really no cost or no additional cost if you're looking to just install the agent, maybe apply some Azure tags, have a look at some of the activity logs that's happening within your server, or even control some role-based access control via the service. We start to see the cost of Azure Arc when you extend beyond that, when you start to add on some of the additional services. So if you start to implement Azure Policy, Azure Defender, Azure Sentinel, backup on top of your Azure Arc agent, that's when you start to pay for it. So it's the additional services that cost you the money when you're talking about Azure Arc. Now, I want to show you a quick demo of Windows Admin Center and how you can onboard a server into Azure Arc with it. So let's dive over into my demo. So here I am in Windows Admin Center, and you can see I'm managing some servers within this environment and even a Windows 10 machine. When I go into the console for this server, down the left-hand side, I have a menu system that exposes lots of different services. We're interested in Azure Arc, so we click on the Hybrid Services menu. And if we scroll down, one of the options is about Azure Arc. Now, what this wizard does is ask us some questions about our Azure subscription. So which Azure subscription do we want to associate this on-prem virtual machine to? Which resource group do we want to store it into? And which Azure region? And this is really just the metadata. You're not storing any actual data from your server. It's just the metadata around that server. Once you've filled in that wizard, what happens is it goes away after a few minutes and installs the agent onto your on-prem server. And once you refresh it with the magic of video, we can see that that agent is now installed and it's now associated to our Azure subscription. So if we pop over to Azure, we can see that server that's on-prem as a server within Azure. You can identify the servers that are Azure Arc servers and versus the ones that are Azure virtual machines by the type. You can see here I've got server, which is Azure Arc, and then I've got virtual machine, and I've even got a different icon for my Azure Arc servers. And this is when I now have visibility of that server within Azure, so I can start to apply tags. If I want to sort and see what's happening to them, I can start to look at some of the monitoring. I can push the logs from my server up into Azure Monitor to have a look at that and have that one single pane of glass for everything to collate. I can then extend the backup. I can extend Azure Security Center. I can extend Azure Sentinel. The possibilities are limitless, to be honest, when you start to look at where this can go for you. So hopefully that gives you a little view or a quick overview of Azure Arc for Windows Server. Now, one of the other challenges that we often have within an environment is patching our servers, making sure that they're up to date. I think we announced this week that there are some really important Exchange server patches that you have to apply. It can leave you really vulnerable, and I think the US government has mandated that everybody across the US government who looks after an Exchange server has to apply these patches this week, like it's an emergency change. So we want to be able to have a mechanism to be able to apply these patches. And this is where Azure Update Management actually comes into play. It can help us deploy our patches to our Windows and Linux machines, regardless of where they are, regardless if they're on-prem, whether they're Azure machines, whether they sit in AWS, whether they sit in your home lab, in your office, like mine do, and it can deploy that software for you automatically. You have the ability to deploy it whenever you want, so you can have an automated period deployment going on. You can have custom approval. So if there's a patch that you don't want to apply, you can say that you don't want to apply it. And you can also install some kind of pre and post scripts to the patching process. So how many times have you had to sit in a data center or at your desk and stop services before you apply a patch? And then once the patches have been applied, you start services on that server, and then everything's good to go. So what you can also do is create those scripts that automate that starting and stopping of those services, so that you can fully automate the process if you want to. Now, one of the other topics that we see across the board is being able to manage all of these servers and infrastructure that are spread out across the various different environments that you have. How do you manage all of your resources? How do you make sure that you're controlling them correctly? How do you make sure that you're meeting those compliance needs that your organization has? And how do you make sure that everything's consistent, especially if you have a diverse infrastructure where a lot of our customers have resources on-prem, they have some in Azure, they have some in AWS, and they need to make sure that everything's happening at the same place or the same way. You don't want to have a different naming convention for your AWS servers to potentially your Azure service, because they're all part of your infrastructure and they need to make sense. Also, things around compliance, if you have to keep your data stored, say, in the UK, for example, to meet that compliance needs within your environment, then you want to make sure that that is all happening and isn't necessarily a burden on your staff. But equally, you shouldn't be employing governance to stop your staff from doing stuff that takes advantage of the cloud and the innovation that you have available. And this is where Azure Policy actually starts to come into play. It can help build in some of that guardrails and that governance that you need within your organization. Now, it's not just on your Azure infrastructure. You can actually start to deploy policies to the in part of your VM. So we call that virtual machine in guest policies. So you can start to, make sure that the clock within your servers is set to the right time zone that you need. You can make sure that software is potentially installed on it. Although I would argue that Azure Policy isn't the type of thing that you want to use to do that kind of remediation. You would rather use DSC, desired state configuration, to do that. But the limits of Azure Policy are endless. You can start to automate and remediate things. You can start to alert. We've recently released a feature called non-compliance messages, so that your staff, if they actually try to deploy a resource that isn't within your compliance policy, they get a message back explaining why it is, and they're not just hit with an error message and they're left wondering what they did wrong. Now, some of the guardrails that we see customers implement are things like allowed locations, like I said, in order to meet that compliance need that you have. Naming conventions, we all want to follow the naming conventions. We don't want that rogue server or rogue bit of infrastructure with a weird name that we can never change after it's went into production. Allowed SKUs, that's also a big one that a lot of customers have issues with. People accidentally deploying the largest SKU of a type of resource, and all of a sudden your budget is gone within a week because of that large SKU. So you want to have that flexibility with your governance, but you don't want the guardrails to be stopping people from actually doing their job and deploying the resources that you need within your environment. Now, I could be talking about Azure Stack for a whole presentation, and this is definitely something that I have talked about at length, but I just want to give you a little heads up to Azure Stack being part of our hybrid profile. We have Azure Stack Edge, we have Azure Stack HCI, and we have Azure Stack Hub. Now, Azure Stack Hub is probably the original Azure Stack product that you're used to. And each of these products have different use cases. They're used in different scenarios and they can be used for different use cases as well. What I want to talk to you about, though, or mention briefly, is the Azure Stack HCI solution, which is our newest offering to the Azure Stack portfolio. What this is OEM hardware that has combined with Windows Server and Windows Admin Center. So there's a theme around here. So Windows Admin Center is one of our core hybrid products. The hardware is validated for running Windows Server. So all of that is kind of done for you. You don't have to guess whether it's actually going to work. But it's not just normal Windows Server that's running on there. It's more an infrastructure type of version of Windows Server. So I'm sure you've all installed Windows Server at some point and you've seen things like the Windows Server fax installed or been available to you, and you don't need it because I don't think anybody really uses faxes anymore, but it's always that annoying features in your Windows Server installations that you don't need. And this is where we don't have them in the Azure Stack HCI offering. It really is that infrastructure product. So this is a great use case if you're thinking about replacing your Hyper-V clusters, your VMware clusters. It's all kind of built there for you, and it's integrated with the cloud management. So Azure Arc is integrated into it, and like I said, Windows Admin Center is at the core of the management as well. Now, I've only touched briefly on some of our hybrid tools. There are a bunch more that I could mention. There's Azure Backup, Azure Site Recovery, Azure Monitor, Azure File Sync, and Azure Security Center. But hopefully it gives you a little flavour of some of the things that you should be thinking about when you're embarking on a hybrid environment and how it can help you within your organisation. If you want to find out more, if you want to see more about the Azure hybrid capabilities, read some of the customer success stories that we've had with other customers, please do check out the link on screen. Now, again, there's more information and expanding and more demonstrations on the slide that I've mentioned here. So if you go to aka.ms/hybrid-talks-resources, there's a bunch of documentation that can help you. I've also linked to some YouTube videos and stuff that show longer demonstrations of what I've talked about and where you can learn more. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I know it has been a whirlwind walk through some of the hybrid capabilities, but hopefully it's been useful and hopefully it's taught you something. And please do connect with me. I love to meet new people and make new connections. So again, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Sarah. That was very interesting. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. I'm sure most of the applicators had fun. And thank you so much. So if you have any links to share with me, I can include them in the presentation email if you want. But thank you so much. I don't see any questions.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you so much. And I'm sure everyone found that very interesting. So thanks again. And yeah, so the next speaker is Divya. She's a senior system administrator at HSBC. Divya, can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks for introducing me. I should just share my screen in a bit.
Yeah, sure.
Second.